So I will start us off. My name is Giovanna Fiorino-Iannace, and I am the adult programming and librarian here at the Harrison Public Library. And I'm also honored to be an ambassador for Adventures by the Book. This is our first book club event of this nature, hybrid, both in person and online. And joining me is also I should say fellow ambassador for Adventures by the Book and author, Janis R. Daly. And so we're delighted to be doing this program with Adventures by the Book and having an opportunity to really spread this wealth of these type of events with everyone pretty much across the world, not only across the tri-state area, across the states, and across the world. So thank you so much for joining us. I will start off by introducing Martha Hall Kelly, and she will be in conversation with Janis. And then we will open the floor up for questions, and you can use your chat box to type in your questions. We will make our best effort to get to all of the questions. Some of you ordered books through Adventures by the Book, but we also have our local bookseller here, the Village Bookstore of Pleasantville, New York. So if you'd like to buy extra copies to give as a gift, I highly recommend it, the Golden Doves. And as you heard, for book clubs as well, this is an excellent choice. So keep that in mind today. And if you don't have an opportunity to buy the book today, you can always reach the Village Bookstore online as well. So let's start with our introduction. Martha's debut novel, Lilac Girls, became a New York Times bestseller the week it was published in 2016, and then went on to sell over 2 million copies and publish in 50 countries. The novel is based on the true story of 72 Polish women who were imprisoned and experimented on at Ravensbrück concentration camp, and how Caroline Faraday, an American philanthropist, brought them to the U.S. for rehabilitation and the trip of a lifetime. Martha followed Lilac Girls with Lost Roses, about Caroline's mother, and Sunflower Sisters, about Caroline's great-grandmother, which also became an instant New York Times bestseller. The Golden Doves returns to World War II and is now available in paperback wherever books are sold, including here tonight. And her upcoming novel, The Martha's Vineyard Beach and Book Club, arrives spring of 2025. Martha grew up in Massachusetts and now splits her time between Litchfield, Connecticut, Hope Sound, Florida, and New York City. So please join us in welcoming Martha Hall Kelly.
Well, thank you all for coming so much. And people here, I'm hearing, have driven from New Jersey and other parts of Westchester County, New York. And new arrival is from... Okay, yes, that works. Excellent. And I know online we saw quite a few. Feel free to put in the chat box where you're coming in from. We saw Oklahoma, and I see some familiar faces myself, some folks that I've been in contact with. So that's lovely to join you all together here. I am just so honored that I get to chat with Martha. I have absolutely loved every single one of her books. She's a role model for me of how do you write historical fiction and write stories, particularly of women who have such incredible stories to have been told, the Caroline Faraday family in particular. And now with Golden Doves, you have found us and brought us more incredible women to think about, and what particularly those women went through after World War II. You know, what was going on after World War II? There's still a lot of history. And I learned so much from this book. So I thank you. I had never heard of the rat line. I don't want to get too many spoilers, or Operation Paperclip, and these amazing things happening. And isn't it fortunate that we have authors like Martha who brings that history to us and teaches us something new that we need to understand, you know, a little bit more so that we can know what's going on in our present as well. So thank you for that. So we are hopefully going to have just a very easy chat. I have a few prepared questions, but we also want to hear from you folks online, you folks here in the audience. So don't be shy, raise your hand. I'm happy to hand a mic off to someone else. Martha said earlier to me tonight, oh, your Boston accent does come out occasionally. So these New Yorkers down here don't want to hear too much of that. So let me start off because as an author myself, I am always in awe of someone that can write not just 2 points of view, Josie and Arlette, but then 2 different timelines going back and forth from time at Ravensbrook and before they went to the camp, and then the after. Arlette still in France and going to South America. Josie going, I lost track of how many different stops she had during the book, but how did you keep it all straight to write that?
When I wrote it originally, I wrote it chronologically. And my agent read it and said, you know, what would be great if you started in the present and then flash back to the Ravensburg parts. And
Martha, can you use your mic? I don't think the people at
Oh, the
online
Zoom.
can hear you as well. It should be.
It should be
Is it,
on.
is it on already?
Thank you for letting us know, Dan.
Is it on? Can you
Should
hear?
be on,
It doesn't feel on.
but they
Can you
hear
hear-
you.
Yeah,
Oh, they can. Okay. How much of that do you think they got?
What? You can start
We
again.
got it.
I'll start again. Sorry about that. I wrote it chronologically, Golden Doves
Yeah.
originally. It's a different book from Lilac Girls, which is 3 point of view characters that is chronological. And this time I had 2 point of view characters. I wanted to write about 2 best friends. And but my agent read the first draft and said, you know, it would be great is if you started out 7 years after they get out of Ravensbrück. And I tried it and I really, really liked it. Yeah. So I had to rewrite the whole book. That took me like maybe a year.
Those darn agents, what do they know?
I know. And my editor was happy with it the way that it was, but we all decided, you know, I think it would make it a little fresher.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's how that happened.
Great. So,
Yeah.
so did you have to revise and like retweak the end of one chapter so it still made
Yes.
sense to flow into the other?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it was all written, so I did just kind of take it apart and then put it back together again. But it's still, yeah, I did have to rewrite a lot. She did the same thing to me now that I think about it with Lilac Girls.
Wow.
She said she wanted me to rewrite the character of Herta Oberhauser, the only female doctor at the all-female camp. And she felt like she was just a little bit cliche of a character. And she said, her name is Alexandra Machinist, my agent. And she said, since I was 14 years old, I have read every Nazi memoir. And her grandparents were Holocaust survivors to find out why. Why did the Nazis do this to the Jews? And she said, the women in Lilac Girls are not Jewish. They're Polish Catholic ladies.
Right.
But she said, show me through Herta how she was inculcated into the Third Reich. And so I took a year off then and rewrote it too. So now that I think about it, you know, she's used to having me do that, but it always turns out better.
Oh, well, it was great. It really kept you engaged and trying to go chapter to chapter and trying to guess what was happening back and related to the front. And speaking of cliches, characters, you learn from that because Dr. Snow, and I'm not giving any spoilers out, but Dr. Snow was not a cliche.
Yeah.
That was a great twist.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of people talk about they didn't see that coming.
No, I didn't. Not at all. You kept us guessing all the time. So when you read the book, you'll find out that Dr. Snow is an integral character.
Well, we don't want to say too much though, because
Identity.
yes.
Yes, absolutely. Great. So another question on your writing as well. Published in 2023. I know that means you must have been writing quite a bit before then. In what year and what was going on in the
COVID
world?
world. Yes, yes. And my son, who uh, he lives in Miami now and he's launched, but at the time he was just coming out of college and he moved home with us. And I was used to having my space, it was, yeah. And his bedroom is right next to my writing office. And then my daughter moved home. She's the one that's getting married this November in Ireland. And she moved home with her cat. Yes. And my husband's like, does not like cats.
Oh dear.
He fell in love
He did.
with that kitty. His grandchild, exactly. And who was originally a feral cat. And he would walk in the room, and for some reason, Saffron, I don't know, she had it in for him and would just like claw at his legs. She wasn't that bad, but to him, she was. But he ended up loving her just the same.
Yeah.
But
So had you already started to write? Where were you kind of
I had
when
already
March
started.
2022 rolled around?
I had already started,
Mm.
but you know how it is. It takes, for me, it takes about 3 years
Yeah.
at least. And so they arrived and wow, it
Mhm.
was interesting. I mean, it was lovely having them there, especially it was such an uncertain time.
Yeah.
And so my husband would like hazmat suit up because remember at the beginning, we didn't know if it was, contracted
Right.
by touch or what it was. And he would put on like a hazmat suit and go out into the world and come back. So, thank God that's over. But, and then once COVID was over, they went their separate ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I also Sunflower Sisters
Yeah.
came out during COVID.
Oh, that
Yeah.
was tough.
So, no book tour really.
Right.
So it's really nice to have things opened up again. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah. Did that COVID experience influence anything in your writing
It
of
did.
Golden Doves?
It did. I had both of them there as a captive audience. My third daughter, Mary, who lives in LA, she's one of my serious editors. She's really, really good. She's helped me a lot with the new Martha's Vineyard book. But she wasn't around, but I had these two. And my son is a real science person. And so I had him as my captive audience.
excellent.
And just things like I decided to add, oh, wow. Now I can't even remember his name. The Arlette's love interest.
Claudio.
Claudio? Is that?
Oh, Arlette, Aaron.
No, Aaron was
Claudio.
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 Yes. I decided that it needed a little spicing up.
Yeah.
And so I put Claudio in there, and my son actually really helped me a lot with Claudio. We would just, he would come sit on my couch and we'd chat about Claudio and,
Oh, wow.
what nationality, he was Brazilian. And yeah. So anyway, too much information, but yeah, it did
I
help a
think
lot.
your son should have anything but be proud that he has a character modeled after him.
Yes, yes, I think that's true. Also, Saffron is in the book.
Oh,
The kitty.
the kitty makes it into the book.
The-
Okay.
Yeah, the kitty made it into the book. Sadly, she passed away after that. She had a heart ailment.
Oh dear.
A lot of feral cats do, and so that was sad. But we got to have her during COVID.
But she lives on in the pages.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful, very interesting. So, as I said, I had never heard of the rat line, Operation Paperclip.
Mhm.
I mean, I knew that Germans had come, the Nazis had come to South America, but I had never followed the line and where they came through Rome and the Vatican and everything else. How much did you know, or did you discover that in research when you were writing?
I didn't know much.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had read Operation Paperclip for Lilac Girls, and that was really interesting how they brought all the scientists over and they put a little paperclip on the files of the ones that the Americans wanted. So that, but I didn't understand the rat line. And the reason I got into that was because during Lilac Girls, I had a wonderful book event. It was a Jewish book tour, and one of the stops, someone named Irene Zisblatt, she introduced me and told a little bit of her own story. And she is a survivor. She was 8 years old when she arrived at Auschwitz. And she was standing on the platform with her mother. And she was holding the hand of her little sister,
Mm.
and her mother was holding the hand of Irene's little brother. And Joseph Mengele walked up to the mom and said, "You come with me." And she said, "I'm not leaving my children." And she had blue eyes, and he wanted to have her for that reason. And he said, "Okay, well, I'm taking her then, Irene, because she had green eyes." And he took his famous baton and he hit their hands and separated Irene from her little sister, and she never saw them again. She went to the famous block where all the children were experimented on, and she kept going to the door, Irene did, to look for her mother. And the wardress said, "Get back in bed. What are you doing?" And she said, "My mother said she's coming to get me." And the wardress said, "See that chimney? That's where your mother is." I know, I know. And Irene told that story. And she also said that she had swallowed 4 diamonds on the platform. Her mother handed them to her and said, "This is all we have. I want you to swallow them and then keep retrieving them and keep them." Because that, and now when she does book
Wow.
events, she wears them
Wow.
in a necklace around her neck. She has a wonderful memoir called The Fifth Diamond. She's the fifth diamond, because it's a short book, and it's I think self-published, but it's really, really good.
That's
and it talks
amazing.
about her time at Auschwitz and how she lost her best friend.
Mhm.
But anyway, when I heard that, I thought, whatever happened to Joseph Mengele?
Yeah.
And that sent me down. While, I had just finished up Lilac Girl, so I knew I couldn't put it in that book, but I knew that I wanted to write about that someday. Because once I looked into it, Mengele, I mean, he lived a pretty free life. It's shocking.
Shocking.
He represented his father's, and it's still a company today in Germany, farm business, Mengele tractors in South America, very openly. So, and he got in and out of Germany. So that sent me down the path of, how did so many of the Nazis end up down in South America? And I found out, well, if people have read Golden Doves, they know now, but they went down across the border, and with the help of the Catholic Church, got on boats and, thousands and thousands of them. Yeah. The first thing we did after COVID was over and they lifted the travel restrictions, my husband and I went to Italy, and along with, like, I think half of America, but we traced the rat line.
You did.
My husband loves wine, so he was really happy.
Easy
about that.
sell then for that
It's a
trip.
pretty easy sell. Yeah. So we went from the border, northern Italy, wonderful wine up in that region, and then worked our way down through Italy to Rome.
Wow.
And yeah, it was quite a trip.
I bet.
Learned a lot
I bet. Great.
about the rat line.
Wonderful. Giovanna, how are we doing? Any questions or any questions from the audience?
We have a question whether the events occurring in French Guiana really happened way back when.
Yes, they did. And if I didn't know about this Netflix series, but it's there's a wonderful series on Netflix called The Sinister Sect. And it's about the place that I based it on, Camp Hope, I think the name of it. Once you move on to the next book, you forget, or at least I do, all of the characters' names. But if you watch The Sinister Sect, it's about an orphanage that was started by a man that I based
Father Peter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's really good because it's a documentary and it's all told from the point of view of the kids, the children at the orphanage there. And it's a fascinating,
And they were German children
that they brought there.
they brought there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
were
just
they
like in the book.
doing research, or was it just an orphanage?
Well, they were doing all sorts of crazy stuff. You have to watch The Sinister Sect to find, especially with the young girls there. They wanted to recreate, Hitler's Third Reich down there.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, I know.
Anybody
Who
sitting
knew?
here? Questions? Yeah.
I have a question
Yeah.
because I love the book club kit that you put together on your website. You talk a lot or a little bit about your playlist. And I love that that inspired you. That was sort of a muse for you to Right. Can you
I
talk a
started
little
that.
bit about
Yeah,
that?
I started doing that with Lilac Girls, and I lived in Atlanta at the time, and I would walk around the neighborhood and imagine, this sounds crazy, like I have imaginary friends, which I do, but I would walk around and listen to certain songs and imagine the scenes in the book. And that was really, really helpful. So I just kept doing that for all my books. And sometimes it's the weirdest songs, but it just happens to be what's popular at the time and
Yeah.
a good like walking beat. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I did that for my new Martha's Vineyard book too. And my next Martha's Vineyard book is about the 70s folk music scene. James Taylor and
Right.
Carly Simon. So I've been listening to a
Exactly.
lot of that.
Great music there.
Really great
Yeah.
music. My favorite. Yeah.
Mm.
But yeah, it's a fun, you can't just sit at your desk all the time and write. You have to get out and do things. So
Yeah. Clear your head, put yourself into a different place in time and
Yes.
mind.
yes.
Yeah.
I remember with Lilac Girls, there was one scene I was having a really hard time with, and it is when Pietrek and Kasia go back to, they're in Poland, and he's kind of closed off, and she reaches out and he takes her hand, or it's a really, now that I think about it, beautiful scene. But the way I came up with that was walking around listening to just one song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking of difficult scenes, was there a more difficult part or character in the Golden Doves that was harder to write?
Oh, wow. One of the things that I always wanted to write about when I was writing Lilac Girls, but it didn't quite fit in, was what they called the Kinderzimmer at Ravensbrück, which is was an experiment by the Nazis, and they wanted to figure out a way to have women that arrived at the camp and were pregnant or had very young children to live in an environment that allowed them to still work. Because what was happening was they would take a newborn from a pregnant mom after the birth, and the mother would get so depressed that they would actually die, and they weren't able to work them to death, which was basically, their plan. So they invented this Kinderzimmer where they could have the moms all live together, and it seemed like such a great idea until it wasn't. It's a little bit of a spoiler to talk too much about it, but that was really, really hard. And I had found at Ravensbrück a book that was on display. If you're ever up in, I know you're going to Berlin for your next book research, but if you just go 50 minutes north and go to Ravensbrück, it's really interesting. Most people have been to Auschwitz or Dachau, but not so much Ravensbrück. But the whole camp is set up, and all the exhibits and everything in all of the houses, like the commandant's house and the wardress's house, like where Herta lived. You can walk in there and walk around, and they've got exhibits. And one of the things, and one of the glass cases that I found in one of those houses, was this book. And it's only, it's open to a certain page, but it's a thick ledger, and it's all the mothers and babies that were born at Ravensbrück, and it has their names and a little black X next to every one of them. So that for me was the hardest thing about this book, writing it. And then Arlette, I don't think it's a spoiler to say she loses her son at Ravensbrück. That part was hard. Being a mom, it's really, I just can't even imagine. And what's so hopeful is a man comes to the cafe and says, where she's working afterwards, and says, I think I know where your son might be. Would you like to come with me to South America? Yeah. Which I don't know. I don't know if I would have.
Well, she was, as a mom, she was desperate. She wanted to believe.
Yeah. And her husband was no longer around. So yeah,
that was tough. But you write about and you bring in topics that we shouldn't forget. We shouldn't erase those. They
No.
need to be brought in.
Yeah, it's hard. One Wednesday night, I got an email from a reader or a comment online. I can't remember what it was, but she said, "You are a sick woman that you wrote this book." And I got to one of the parts and I threw the book across the room, and I'm not finishing it. And so that night at dinner, I was saying to my husband, I thought I was doing a good thing writing this and telling the world
Mhm.
about it. And, we were having wine, you know, and
Brought back from Italy.
no, this is before, but in the Lilac Girls days, but, he's always great to talk to. And then the next day she emailed me again and said, "Oh, by the way, I picked it up again and I finished it and it was great." And I was like, how you ruined my dinner. But I do think that it is hard.
Yeah.
And, but I think you have to go there and remember.
She wasn't reacting to you or to your writing, but to the issue or the events you were writing about.
Yeah, I think sometimes writers, they don't really dig in. And I felt like I had to kind of, because anything less than that was really doing a disservice to those women. And, I had met them and I really took them on as my,
Yeah.
I was very sympathetic to their plight.
Yeah. How many of them are still around? Have you
None,
seen?
they're all
They're all gone.
Yeah, there was
Wow.
one named Wanda Patelska. She was in her 100 and something. We're not 100% sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, she just passed away. It was really, really sad. I made a friend in Atlanta who was a documentary filmmaker, Stacy Fitzgerald. And Stacy and I went once by myself with my son, Michael, and I went again with Stacy, and she brought a film crew. So we got to meet two of the rabbits. Yeah. Oh my God.
Wow.
Stasha and another Wanda. And they were lovely. And Stacy went back again to get more footage from Wanda, and she said, "Where's Martha?" And Stacy said, all through an interpreter. Stacy said, "Oh, Martha couldn't come because she's working on her next book." And she said, "Will you tell her I just finished Lilac Girls and it's all true?"
Wow.
From one of the rabbits.
That's amazing. What a testament. Fantastic.
Yeah, she came to the 75th anniversary with the most amazing red nails. And I just thought, you know what? She showed up with, it just was lovely to see them out and living, because they had told me before, when they first came back to Poland, they were really, really down. Dancing was a big thing back in those days, and they couldn't dance. It was hard to date someone after you've been in a concentration camp. And they all got together and said, "You know what? The Nazis didn't kill us. They wanted to, but they didn't. So we have to stop this hatred." And she said, once they gave up that hate, it all just got better for them. And they traveled around the world talking about it. They were like rock stars.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. Kids were coming up to them and taking selfies with them.
Wow.
They were
good.
Yeah.
They would do that. They would do that.
Yeah, they were lovely.
Well, it sounds like you must have done a lot of research for the Lilac Girls that you were able to use
Yes.
in the Golden Doves.
Yes, which was really nice. Yeah, and there were a lot of characters that are repeated. Like we see Herta in her in jail. Yeah.
Giovanna.
Yes, sorry, didn't want to interject there. There is a comment and two questions. So Denise says, with regard to the reaction that reader had, that's the sign of a good book when you get so emotionally involved.
Wow.
Yes.
Which is
Thank
true.
you. That makes me feel good.
Because I cried several times throughout the book. And then, oh, it says that I'm muted. So maybe the people at home did not hear me. So sorry. Oh, no, wait a second. I think I was supposed to be muted. Oh. Try it now. No. Feedback, sorry about that.
You should be back up. Sorry.
Okay.
We all need a
Back-
Dan. Thank you,
back
Dan.
on
A round of
schedule.
applause
Back
for
on?
Dan.
No, thank you.
Yay.
Yay. Okay, good. Excellent.
Excellent.
But anyway,
Technology.
sometimes when I wake up in the morning, you know that moment where you're just kind of coming into consciousness? Sometimes I do have moments, and you know, if you think about it, it's right before I go to bed.
Oh,
Yeah. Like if I'm up reading for like an hour, I have a pen and pencil right there
Yeah.
because stuff starts coming fast and furiously, but not while I'm sleeping. Yeah.
good for you. Uninterrupted REM is very important for a writer.
Yes. So you actually get ideas in your sleep?
Well, I'll wake up and and then I scribble it in the dark and without my glasses on, and I don't know what it says in the next line anyway. So-
no. But it's
Or
really
sometimes I will email it to myself. And I can at least read it.
that's better.
Yeah.
And the second question was about researching your books, how intense it must be and how often difficult to process. So how do you pace yourself?
How do I pace myself?
Yes.
Wow. Well, it depends on the book, really. I think Lilac Girls was so intense because I'd never written a book before. And I figured, who's going to read that? And I was just desperate to get that story out. And I was, you know, it was easy to kind of push through anything with that. And I know that the subject is difficult, just like, you know, World War One, which you're going to write about next, it was difficult, the Bolshevik Revolution, and then the Civil War. I mean, it's all really emotionally taxing, but I think, you know, especially with Lilac Girls, I just pushed through it. And I felt like I was method acting in a way, like I was going through it and I had to experience it in order to put it on the page. So I thought, you know, that's a small price to pay. I think that psychologically, a whole group of, I did a Zoom with Novel Network with a group of Canadian psychotherapists, and they, you know, psychoanalyzed me, and they said that they think that I was sublimating.
Recession, no? I mean, come on.
I know. It was, you know, probably like a $10,000, you know, thing. But after a while, I was like, that's okay. We don't need to dig in any deeper than that. But they did feel like I was sublimating a lot because I would do things like pick my son up at school and he would say, Mom, have you been writing Herta chapters? And I'd say, yes, as a matter of fact, get in. Or my friend Stacy and I had been researching for so long about the rabbits. And I said to her, you know, it's weird. I am always hungry. And then she started researching and said, I'm eating like crazy. And then we realized we're eating for them. Yeah.
Wow.
So I do think that, but it was also cathartic because I based two of the characters on my daughters. They had gone to college and I got to be with them. My mom had passed away and I based Mata on my mother. So in a way, I got to be with them every day. So yeah.
So Arlette and Josie, method acting, did Martha come through a little bit more in Arlette or Josie?
I think, well, Josie is my husband's favorite character of all time, weirdly. And she's American, so I think there's more of me in there. But I lost my best friend many years ago, and I based it kind of in my own head on the two of us. So yeah,
Wonderful.
Arlette's based on Joan more, my high school friend that I lost. But yeah, I do that all the time in every single book. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Excellent. Anything else? Yes, right here in the audience.
first book? Do you have a deadline for your first?
Oh, did I have a deadline for Lilac Girls?
Yeah.
Oh, no. No one's ever asked me that before. That's a great question. With a debut novel, what happens is you have to get an agent, a literary agent, because without that, you can't get published or it's hard with a big five publisher. And so what you do is you submit a manuscript that is finished and it's on your own time. Whenever that gets finished, you query, which is you write this little paragraph and you just email it to agents. And they either say, yes, please send me your manuscript, or no, thank you. Usually, no, thank you. Stephen King has that wonderful story of how up in his attic, I don't know if he still does now that he's like a billionaire. If he still writes up in his attic, he probably does. But he had a spike sticking out of the ceiling. There's like a slope in his attic. And he put all his rejection letters on, he like impaled them on that stake. That's so Stephen King, isn't it? And he got to the end of the stake before he got published. Yeah. So I don't think a lot of people realize that writers go through a lot of rejection. I got really lucky. I sent out 5 queries and 4 of those offered me representation. So I know I get lucky. I mean, I found a true story that happened to be really interesting. So I think that's what they were responding to. But so to answer your question, now when I get a contract for my next book, it will have a due date on it. But for a debut novel, you can write it, it could take you your whole life to write it. But once you have a contract, you have a due date.
Yeah. Great.
How long? What?
Stephen King's.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
He has a wonderful book called On Writing. And he has a lot of funny stories in it. He's so funny.
He is.
Yeah. But I bet if you read that, I think he talks about the stake in that.
Yeah. But Lilac Girls and Golden Doves, World War II. And we know that that's been a very popular time period to write about. What do you contribute the interest and the staying power of the books written for World War II?
Well, I think, there is the conflict, as we know, as novelists, it's all about conflict. And the Nazis, I mean, I think we're still trying to wrap our minds around it was just so strange and horrible and brutal. And then you've got Russia, Mussolini. I mean, there were a lot of really bad players in that. And it's also something that a lot of people, like their fathers, maybe fought in World War II, or, it's the most recent of the big conflicts. So I think that's part of it. But there's always a new angle. Like my new book, that comes out next summer. Actually, it's not a spring book anymore. It's going to kick off summer, which is really
my
fun.
hometown area. I'm going to begin to see
it's too long.
Lots of time with Martha next year. If it comes to Cape Cod.
You live in Cape Cod. Yeah. I think our whole book tour is going to be Cape Cod and the islands. Yeah. But yeah, there's always a new twist on World War II. Just, sometimes people write reviews, and like in Goodreads or whatever, and they'll say, I thought I swore off of World War II fiction, but then I read this. And so
is that my review that you read? I think I said that I had wanted to take a break, but then I had to pick this up, and boy, am I glad I did.
A lot of people say that because I mean, there have been a lot of books written about it, but there's a reason, because they're really, and they will continue to, I think.
Yeah. Well, there are so many different pockets. What was happening in Germany? What was happening in France? What was happening in Great Britain? Mark Sullivan's books, The Last Green Valley. We learned about Ukraine's history and all. So there's still a lot probably to be unearthed.
Yeah. There's always trends. Like right now it's, Colleen Hoover and romance, but things go through cycles.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Yes.
My in-laws were survivors. My father-in-law lived in Germany. They got out right after Kristallnacht. My
Mm.
mother-in-law
Wow.
was in Auschwitz and she was charged for Galen's there.
Ugh.
And my take on what you're discussing right now, when I was a kid, and I don't know why, I was fascinated by watching, I'm gonna really date myself, Stalag 17.
Mhm.
Hero.
Oh, yes.
And
We all hear you. We're all Bob Crane. He looked very good in that uniform. Mm.
He was a Pacific, but he didn't really talk about it. There were many books. They were all from men's point of view. My first World War II book obviously was Nick.
Oh, man.
But now, I know the last 7 years, there's been so many authors like you, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart, finding these women's stories. And women play a huge role in war efforts, whether they were in camps, whether they were on the front front, whether they were in America, all kinds of stories that nobody, authors like you brought that to the forefront, and for that.
Oh.
Yes.
She could be alive now. She was a reader, and she might have read it, she might not have, because she lived it. So.
It's very difficult. Yeah. Well, thank you. That's so nice. I know they moved it back. It was supposed to
Have
be
to wait.
April 2nd, and
Yeah.
now it's May 26th.
Maybe you can recap what she said.
Sure. We apologize to the folks up on Zoom that the audio
Maybe
wasn't.
you
Do,
need the mic.
do you mind just recanting a little bit of what you just said? Because your story is so interesting in your comments. Thank you.
That's okay.
Okay, I want to thank you and all the other authors for bringing these stories to the forefront over the last, 20 years. As a child, I was always fascinated by World War II from watching Stalag 17 and Hogan's Heroes and other shows that were on TV. And my dad fought in World War II, but he was in the Pacific. And my in-laws were survivors. My father-in-law left Germany right after Kristallnacht. He and his family were lucky to get out. They went to South America. They lived in Ecuador. My mother-in-law and her parents were not so fortunate. We actually took a trip to Europe several years ago, tracing their journey. And she was in Theresienstadt, and then they went to Auschwitz, and that's where her parents were killed. She was adopted by her aunt and uncle in Ecuador, and that's where they met. But without authors like you, we wouldn't know the women's stories. And, that's something that I didn't know other than Anne Frank as I was growing up. But I don't know how many years I started reading World War II. And my friends are like, why do you keep reading World War II? There's always a story to be told. And, I'm online with lots of different authors. And I thank you all from the bottom of my heart for bringing these stories to the forefront and, making everybody aware that women were active, whether on the home front, in the concentration camps, underground resistance in America, fighting, thank you.
Oh, that is so, thank you for sharing that and getting it perfect. You prove it. No, that was
That's
perfect.
great.
But
Great.
I feel like people are forgetting. And I think that it's important for that reason too, is to just like have the new generation understand
Well,
what really
because we are
happened.
losing that greatest generation,
Yeah.
I worry about that as well, because I know that when my generation gets together at family things, our parents, they were very active in the war, but the next generation don't really have any idea of what has gone on, why people fought. And I'm really afraid that when we die out, a lot of these stories are going to die out with them. And the schools aren't teaching Anne Frank and things like that much as when we were young girls. So I think that it's really important that these novels stay in the forefront and the authors have, audiences, and we can I don't have kids, but you know, when I talk to my cousins' kids and whatever, to let them know that these are the things that they should be reading, because you really need to be exposed to all the bad that's happened in this world to prevent it from happening again.
Yeah. Yeah. That is really well said. Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah, no, that's fabulous. And I'll just let everyone know Martha's Lilac Girls was on a list I put together last year for Women's History Month. In 2023, Lilac Girls was on there, and I have another list that I put out this year and I'm working on next year, and it's to celebrate women in history during March, Women's History Month. So 31 books to read, and it's all based like Lilac Girls on real women in history. So I can share that maybe through the chat or something.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
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 So I think
Mm-hmm.
for a couple months.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. All of you here, I have a flyer I'll give you before you leave.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. Great.
And
Great.
someone online as well, Dan Skinner, applauds you, saying she has a great gift. Thank you for bringing history to life. It
Aw.
means so much more
Thank you,
when
Dan.
it is personalized.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And he also added there are a lot of layers to look at in any time period, so much to learn. And Denise commented, thankfully, the movie industry isn't afraid of exposing the truth of what occurred during war times.
Mm.
And 2 questions. After Lilac Girls, where were the other 2 books in the series under contract for a trilogy?
No, my
Mm.
husband said if once Lilac Girls was in paperback and it was, successful, my husband said, if you want to write more books, this is your leverage moment. I was like, oh, okay. You better go back and tell them. And so that's when I said, I want to write about Caroline's mother and great grandmother. Yeah. So that was a 2-book deal.
And then relating to the comment on the movie industry, any options out there for any of your books? 'Cause they're
Elizabeth
amazing.
Moss
Oh.
optioned Lilac Girls, and she wanted to be Herta, which she would have been so good.
Oh, wow.
But she shopped it around Hollywood and no takers. I think the general consensus is that it's a lot of women in it, and this was,
And what's wrong with
I was
that?
thinking the same thing.
2017.
We're 50% of the viewing population.
I know.
At least.
They're looking for, young men, basically. But anyway, who knows? Maybe the next book.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. Well, certainly with Golden Doves, you did such a great job with a trilogy. Again, no spoilers, but Golden Doves, we could love to have a sequel.
Oh, yes. A lot of people have been asking about that.
Yeah.
But
And
my publisher wanted a Martha's Vineyard book.
okay.
So, what they want, they get. So, yeah.
They're the ones that sign the checks.
Yeah. I know what happens in the.
Oh, you do?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. My husband and I, over wine, figured it out. Yeah.
Well,
It's
you
really
can tell us
nice.
off mic in the back
Okay.
corner.
Okay.
Because Janet and I were curious, we were talking earlier because and no spoilers, I don't think. That one of the last lines in the book is "Watch your back,
Oh,
like
yeah.
bread."
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
forgot
I'm
about
like,
that.
dun dun dun.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
I know. Yeah. Well, it's all in my brain.
Okay.
But
We'll get you some more wine and see if it comes out. Yes.
You obviously research your books so intensely. How do you balance the research with the fictional aspects, especially when you're writing about real people like the Faraday women?
yeah, that's a good question. I was so new to writing that I had to give myself a rule that if it's real, if I know that because I researched Caroline for at least 5 years before I wrote anything or even thought about writing anything about her. And it all came out when I moved to Atlanta and I went through the Starbucks drive-through and and ordered my usual decaf cappuccino grande, but by mistake, the barista gave me a caffeinated one. And I went home and it all started just like coming out. It was crazy. So I researched her for 5 years before I did any, just because I really loved her. I thought she was so principled and so interesting. And so when I started writing after the caffeinated moment, I had this editor that I was working with, and she said, you know, you should give her a love interest because you don't want her to come across as some, you know, a person, everyone has that part of them. And I said, but I don't know anything about her. I don't know anything about her sexuality. So I really resisted that for a long time. But then her French maid, who lived across the street from her and was often in France, and I was kind of stalking. I saw her one night. I was at the Bellamy Faraday house upstairs researching, and I saw her come home. And I called her, and she actually answered her phone, poor thing. I could tell from her voice, she was like, oh, God. And I said, I'm right across the street. Do you mind if I run over? And she said, okay. And I ran like across the field. I was like putting my coat on. And I went over there. And at first, she and Caroline had a contentious relationship because they were both very strong women. And, you know, yeah. So she said, the first thing she said was, I don't want to talk to you. And then she talked for 3 hours. And so, but one of the things that she said was that Caroline had a boyfriend, a long distance love affair. And I thought, oh, finally, I can write about him. And she told me a lot about him, how, I mean, silly things like she would talk on the phone and walk around the house, and her pig would, she had a pet pig, would follow her around the house, and she spoke French to the pig, and the boyfriend didn't like that. And so, you know, she told me a lot of really good stuff, a lot of stuff also that I could never tell anyone else, but because it's very private. But yeah, once I had that as an example to your question, I knew that I could write about that. Yeah. But if I didn't, I had a hard time throwing stuff in there that just was like, at one point I thought, oh, maybe I could give her a child. And then I thought, no, she didn't have a child. So no. So I really, really tried to stick to the story. And I do that with all my books that are based on a real story.
One more question, whether you keep the copyright.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. All authors do, I think, right? Yeah.
Anything else?
I'm sorry, I have a lot of questions.
No, that's a
Um,
good
how-
thing.
how
That's great.
difficult, and you sort of touched it on in the last little blurb. How difficult, is it more difficult to completely make up a character or to base it on true life?
That's a
Like,
great question.
because the thing is, your character development is so wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
And it just, I don't know how that could come out of my head, you know, something so beautiful as how you do it.
Oh.
But is it different?
It's way harder to base it on someone that is not real. Yeah. Oh, yes, 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 yes. It's way, way harder for me anyway. I mean, Caroline was a real person, so you can describe them and know how they act, and you don't have to kind of inject them with all sorts of stuff. And my new book that's coming out next summer, it's mostly people that, I mean, it's based on my mom and her experiences, but I had to do that, start with characters from the ground up, and it's definitely harder. I think in the long run, it can be just as satisfying, but it's just a little bit more work. Yeah.
Can I do another question?
Absolutely.
When you start writing, do you start writing from an outline, or do you start writing from, I have this character in mind, or I have this place and time and history, or is it different for every book that you write?
For me, with Lilac Rose, I didn't know you had to write an outline, and some people don't. But for me, once I knew that you could write an outline, I became obsessive. It's actually at the
Plotzers, the
right at the Bellamy Faraday house. My husband calls it the Martha Shrine. They have like a little glass box that has like some of my stuff in it. And one of the things is my outline, and it goes from like there to there. Once I started outlining, I was like, this is going to be a real outline. So everybody's different, but as long as I know the end, I'm good. But some people write and they don't know the ending. I could never. Because to me, the whole thing is you're building up to the end. So
Yeah.
Good. Thank you for those. But
we're just about
Yeah,
ready
we
to
can-
wrap up unless
we
there's
can
anything
wrap up
inside.
If anyone has a
I
lot.
just wanted to tell you a little bit about my next book.
Yes. Oh, that was going to be my end question.
Oh, it
Go
was?
for it.
Okay.
Yes.
Just because I'm so excited about it, and I haven't been able to talk to anybody about it. We haven't even debuted the cover because it's going to be a summer book. So they only let you debut the cover 9 months ahead. So I have
Can
the
I say
cover,
that I got a sneak peek?
And
And
what
it's
you think?
awesome.
I love it so
It's
much.
great.
I really, really love it. There's something, I don't know. Martha's Vineyard, I was named after Martha's Vineyard. My mom was from there. I've been going there for 67 years. So it's a really, really special book. And just briefly, the story is a girl named Mari Starwood arrives on Martha's Vineyard, and she's in her 30s. And she was very close to her mother in California. And when her mom dies, in her effects, she finds the address of this famous painter on Martha's Vineyard, Elizabeth Devereux. And she goes to Martha's Vineyard under the guise of taking a painting class. And when she gets there and confronts Mrs. Devereux and says, how did you know my mother? My mother's never been out of California. Mrs. Devereux says, well, you're wrong about that. And I have a story I need to tell you. And she tells her a story of two young sisters who they have a brother as well, the Smiths. That was my mom's name, grew up on this beautiful farm on Martha's Vineyard during World War II. And what people don't realize is that was there was an army base there. There were a lot of German U-boats all up and down that area, and maybe something happens with someone coming on shore from one of those. That's not a spoiler, but yeah, it's a really. I think it's right up there with Lilac Girls in terms of emotion.
Really?
I reread it I keep listening to it because I have a thing on my computer where I can listen to it. And I was like really crying the last time I read it. Or
So
listened
note
to
to the
it.
booksellers, if you put packets of Kleenex next to the books.
But they say no tears in the writer, no tears in the reader. And I don't know, I like an emotional book. I like one that, and the whole baggage with my mother. And I had some fun with it. I looked at who my top fans were on social media, and I worked their names into the book. Miss
So
Susan.
anybody here in the audience or on Zoom?
I think I recognized a couple of people that are also in it on there too. But anyway, so that was super fun. I just and one of the characters wants to be a writer, and I just feel like I think people are going to like it.
Yeah. May
Maybe
2025.
one.
I bet it will be on pre-order by January, February.
It's on pre-order
It's on
now.
pre-order now.
Yeah,
Without the cover.
Without the cover. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. They're telling me this week.
No,
That's the next one. They haven't announced that one yet. They're working on the contract for that one right now. Yeah, I know. A lot. Yeah. But if I write quicker, they'll come out quicker. And my husband keeps saying, James Patterson writes 4 books a year. It's like, Mike.
Every week there's a book.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, not James, but
Right.
but I'll try to do this one a little quicker. Yeah, because I like it when it's done too. But yeah, that one's still in the 1970s book is Martha's Vineyard as well. James Taylor and Carly Simon, but not, not saying it's them.
Right.
But I was alive during that point. So,
Yeah.
so that's a fun one.
Right.
Fun one to write. So
Mhm.
thank you
Great.
for letting me talk about all of that, because
Oh,
I just
yes.
cannot wait. We're going to have a launch party on
On the
Martha's
Vineyard,
Vineyard.
of course.
Yeah.
Buy your ferry tickets. If you need to take your car over, buy your ferry tickets now, because that's almost impossible to get your car over to the vineyard.
Yes. Book clubs are
Yeah.
talking
But
about
they have
them.
bike rentals on the vineyard, and that's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Just put your backpack on, you'll be all set.
So I hope everyone likes it, and please email me nice emails instead of that lady that was throwing the book across.
Yeah.
But yeah, me too. I
Yeah.
think I can't wait to share it with everybody.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. And on behalf of everyone at Adventures by the Book, those folks on Zoom, we appreciate you coming and joining us tonight, and the audience here, and Giovanna for hosting us at
7.
beautiful
Wow.
Harrison Public Library is lovely.
Wow.
And there is another Adventures by the Book event next week. I think it's 1 week from tonight, the 14th. It's a
Here?
fest. It's all on Zoom.
Oh.
And many authors, including yours truly, will be talking about our upcoming books for the fall. Oh, my next book comes out September 5th. It's a sequel as well. It's The Path Beneath Her Feet, which is a sequel to The Unlocked Path. So I'll be talking about that a little bit more at Pitch Fest next week. And I'll have other information for you. So sure. Thank you for asking. I believe it's 7 o'clock. I think they try to stick to 7 to accommodate most of the time zones.
Right. Eastern time, I think, is 7
7,
p.m.
I always, yeah.
Pitch Fest.
Pitch Fest.
Pitchfest.
Yeah.
I think about your books tonight, right?
Yeah, I do have some of
Okay,
my books
good.
here tonight too. Great.
So we'll do that. Well,
Wonderful.
thanks everybody
Thank
for
you.
tuning in and for being here. This was so fun.
Okay, well, that'll end our program for tonight. If anyone would like to purchase books from our bookseller, the Village Bookstore, they're available in the back. We'll see you at the next Adventures by the Book Book Club discussion.